In February 1986, the gathering of millions along the avenue called EDSA was celebrated as a peaceful movement that overthrew the dictatorship. Larry Diamond wrote in 1994, "What could be more moving than the stories of brave bands of students, writers, artists, pastors, teachers, laborers, and mothers challenging the duplicity, corruption, and brutal domination of authoritarian states? Could any sight be more awe-inspiring to Democrats than the one they saw in Manila in 1986, where hundreds of thousands of organized and peaceful citizens surged into the streets to reclaim their stolen election and force Ferdinand Marcos out through a nonviolent people power?" The people power may seem a spontaneous event, but it was backed by broad alliances that wanted Marcos out, including opposition parties Unido and the leftist Bayan. The leading figure of the movement was Corazon Aquino, the widow of Ninoy Aquino, the opposition leader assassinated in 1983, pictured here. So when Marcos took the back door to Hawaii, Corazon Aquino was sworn in as president. The new government was, however, fragile, as military officers and businessmen who were still loyal to Marcos tried to destabilize the new government. Her regime was rocked by threats of coups and long bouts of electrical power shortages that made for political and economic instability. In the transition to democracy, the communists and the Moro insurgencies continued. Acknowledging the civil war in the Philippines, the new government pursued peace negotiations with the communist led National Democratic Front of the Philippines, or NDFP, and the MNLF. The negotiations with the MNLF resulted in the establishment of the Autonomous Region for Muslim Mindanao. Meanwhile, internal conflict has weakened the CPP, NPA, NDFP, splitting the party in 1991. At the same time, an extremist Islamic group called the Abu Sayyaf was also being formed in the Sulu archipelago. Who are the Abu Sayyaf? Mark Turner notes that they are a tiny armed group in Mindanao that has links to international Islamist networks, but are also allegedly linked to the military, based on journalist accounts and testimonies of former kidnapped victims. Furthermore, Turner argues they are successful entrepreneurs of violence in a place of insecurity. The succeeding presidents in the transition to democracy all had counterinsurgency campaigns and varying positions against communist and Moro insurgencies. For instance, the anti-subversion law was lifted in 1992 during the Ramos regime, meaning being a communist is not illegal anymore. Meanwhile, Estrada pursued an all-out war in Mindanao that displaced 1.28 million people in the year 2000 alone. It's Estrada. To an extent, the insurgencies in the Philippines challenge democratic consolidation as they directly challenge the state monopoly to military and social services, and in some areas even tax collection. But in the context of ongoing peace negotiations, the struggle for power may be seen as part of democratic consolidation. The ongoing peace negotiations between the government of the Philippines and the MILF are expected to conclude in the next year. However, the watering down and railroading of the Bangsamoro Basic Law, a law that will replace the autonomous region of Muslim Mindanao with the Bangsamoro, may be a disservice to the Moro struggle and rekindle conflict later on. And of course, indeed, the BIFF, or the Bangsamoro Islamic Freedom Fighters, have broken away from the MILF in protest. Anyway, meanwhile, the negotiations with the CPP, NPA, and the FP are still on hold. So in the second part of this presentation, I argued that the pacification of the MNLF created breakaway groups that continue to challenge the authority of the state. Meanwhile, the decline in the CPP, NPA, and NDFP membership was not because of military action by the state, but a result of internal divisions within the left. So long as the state is willing to share power and pursue peace negotiations, the continued political and military engagements of the communists and the Moros may be seen as elements of democratic consolidation. After 9/11, the regime led by Gloria Macapagal Arroyo used the US war on terror to fund its domestic battles against insurgencies. The process was twofold. First, the NPA and the Abu Sayyaf group were tagged as terrorists in 2002. The fact that the CPP, NPA, NDFP is a belligerent entity as a signatory to the Geneva Conventions, theoretically following a just conduct of war, and signed with the government of the Philippines a comprehensive agreement on the respect for human rights and international humanitarian law, or CARIL, in 1998, were disregarded by the United States in their terror listing. Secondly, the government solicited anti-terror funds to beef up its anti-insurgency campaigns through joint military exercises, training, and equipment. Arroyo vowed to eliminate the communist insurgency during her term by heavily militarizing the countryside. In 2003, Arroyo announced a counterinsurgency campaign exposing guerrilla-linked groups. From 2001 to 2009, the extrajudicial killings in the Philippines spiked up to 1,188, with the most number of killings in 2005 and 2006, according to human rights organization Karapatan. In 2007, UN Special Rapporteur on Extrajudicial Summary or Arbitrary Executions, Philip Alston, castigated the military as being in a state of denial concerning extralegal executions. In Mindanao, Arroyo allied with powerful elites such as the Ampatuans. The extrajudicial killings during her term include 58 mostly media workers in an election-related violence or a massacre in Maguindanao in November 2009. The Ampatuans were primary suspects who allegedly raided the party of their rival clan, the Mangudadatus, on their way to file a certificate of candidacy. A Bangsamoro conflict monitoring system has recently been launched. The system monitors conflict in the Bangsamoro area using police and media reports verified by civil society organizations. The link is provided here, and you can create an account and make your own graphs and charts correlating elements of your interest. According to their database, civilians, usually backed by clans, are the primary actors in violent conflict from 2011 to 2014. This is a sign of communal or horizontal violence in the Bangsamoro. Discounting the undetermined factors, or undetermined actors rather, the government army or the armed forces of the Philippines comes second and the police comes third as actors of violent conflict in Mindanao. So the picture I am painting here is one of impunity, where the perpetrators of the violence are part of and protected by the state. For instance, Major General Jovito Palparan, also known as the Butcher in the Philippine countryside, whose deployment in an area left a trail of extrajudicial killings, enforced disappearances, and torture, was publicly praised by Gloria Macapagal Arroyo and promoted to a two-star general before he retired in 2006. Palparan only faces criminal charges since 2011 for, among others, violating the Convention Against Torture. He tried to leave the country and was in hiding until his arrest in 2014. Both Palparan and Gloria Macapagal Arroyo have tried to escape trial by running for public office and underscoring their failing health. So, to conclude, we revisit two questions posed in the beginning of the presentation. First, how do internal security issues in the Philippines challenge or support democratic consolidation? I have showed that peace negotiations with the two long-running insurgencies in the Philippines could be seen as elements of democratic consolidation. However, the counterinsurgency campaigns of regimes that of Gloria Macapagal Arroyo's seem to betray authoritarian elements rather than consolidation of democracy. Secondly, how does the adoption of counterterrorism norms shape internal security policies in the Philippines? I have showed that it has beefed up the state's military power against insurgencies. Anya Yetzke describes the Philippines as an exemplary case of how states of the Global South, in their quest for state security, deal with challenges to their authority. The government was a successful entrepreneur of norms to expand counterterrorism to insurgencies of MILF and the NPA. To this end, the alleged MILF links to foreign Islamist networks and NPA's killing of a former NPA chief gave the government the opportunity to brand them as terrorists. The Abu Sayyaf group was useful to get the United States support and to legitimize the presence of the US military in Mindanao. Meanwhile, the branding of the communist insurgents as terrorists follows a neoliberal logic that casts critiques of capitalism as enemies. The costs were more than the death toll. The military, with US assistance, waged an all-out war against terrorism in the Philippines, displacing 400,000 in 2003 and 380,000 in October 2008. Data generated by the Bangsamoro Conflict Monitoring System from 2011 to 2014 reveals that the total number of people who died, were injured, kidnapped, or trafficked reached 7,972, while the total number of families displaced reached over 77,000. Displacement in conflict needs more attention as it drives away communities of families from a stable social and economic life to a condition fraught with risks and insecurities. In summary, causes for conflict, such as dispossession, the huge inequality, and human rights violations with impunity, are still features of the transition to democracy in the Philippines today. After 9/11, the state has successfully used global norms on the war against terror to gain military funds in support for their anti-insurgency campaigns. The costs of this, however, are more human rights violations that in turn feed the insurgencies.